Morning, Anthony.
Hey, good morning, Jack.
Another day at the races.
Dude, I don't know, man. I changed. I might have gone too far this time.
Well, you went where you went, so that's done.
If I can bought the crypt next to Marilyn Monroe, I get to spend the rest of my life with Marilyn. 4 away, so not right next to her. Finally, all my problems are solved now. Now I look forward to not being here anymore.
You think
Like
that's where
somewhere,
you're gonna end up there, or was it an investment?
you know what? If somebody offered me $1 million, 500,000 for it, and I made money, where would I go? I have nowhere else to go. I bought it for a reason.
Well, everything is done for a reason. It doesn't mean it makes sense.
And then I bought that Hugh Hefner bed. If I can't be happy now, I mean, I might as well just fucking never come back to the class. Just shoot myself. I have everything I want. Finally. Not everything, but enough.
Well, if you think stuff, circumstances, possessions are everything, then you're missing the point of this conversation.
Isn't this possessions are everything meeting?
Well, if they were, then people would stop striving for them when they had some. And there never seems to be enough when that compulsive trigger is in action. If we're trying to fulfill something that's already full because we don't think it's full, it would be very typical to feel as though we need more of something else because the thing we have, we're refusing to admit we have.
Yeah.
So it's sort
One of the problems, though, is everything seems kind of like you collect all this stuff and it seems so meaningless. You're like, okay, now what? You're just going to be dead one day. It's like, yeah, okay, we've got that covered now too. We're good.
Well, think though. I mean, this is an interesting day. This is Easter Sunday, and Easter is about resurrection. But think of it, Anthony, in terms of what our discussion is. If we're holding on to ideas that are not true, and they create a desperation in our own experience, simply doing that, we don't even have to be deliberate about that or think we're doing it for the impact of those thoughts to be conflict, creating an inner conflict and emotional anguish, mental anguish, emotional strain, turmoil, etc. Those would be natural byproducts of that. If I'm trying to fix those things while I'm maintaining the same idea that created those things, I'm simply asking to continue to suffer those things in the name of thinking that someday what my basic thinking will come true, which is basically thinking that fantasy is reality. And that would be a major misstep, a major wishful thinking. So our discussion, as you know, having had it for some time, focusing now, especially today, I think it's a good day to talk about this, because if we think we're resurrecting thoughts that have no life simply by continuing to maintain them with this vain hope that someday we'll have enough, someday we'll get there, someday it will be right. And
I feel like that's happened. I feel like today is the someday.
But you even said that and then said, well, not everything. You always tend to have there's a little bit around the edge that you think you need a little more. So the point isn't that you can't have things. And that's what I'm not suggesting not to have things.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that in this mental discussion that we're having, if we think the totality of things is just things that we can take title to, things that we can possess, things that we can control, things that we can influence, we're missing, in terms of our own consideration, the enormity of existing on the basis of something that doesn't come and go, isn't more or less, isn't then and there, but always here and now. It's always present. And it's only present to us who are human because, in terms of here and now, because we think in spatial terms. We're living in an experience that's relative, and yet we're based in an experience and present state of being that is not relative.
But said okay. As long as I get what I want, I'm okay.
You there?
Yeah.
Well, but you wouldn't come as long as you have and be struggling with the things that you do if that were in fact the case. Because if you already have everything, then you can't want any more than that. And to want any more is to suggest you don't have what you have. And that's a major deteriorative position to take in relation to an essence that isn't divisible, that can't be more or less, that isn't divided. It's not then and there, as I just said.
Yeah.
So it isn't so much, we crossed this point a week or two ago with you where you said, I just believe my thoughts are true. I believe they're real. And you're welcome to think that. And I would suggest to you that the yearning for more comes from that thinking. And that yearning is never going to be satisfied because the thinking can't ever be real. It can't ever be true. If you're thinking a lie is true, you're thinking it's the one thing it can't possibly be. And to maintain that with the vain hope that someday it will be is to end up with all of the reactive and impulsive and compulsive behaviors that are a natural consequence of trying to escape that internal conflict, trying to get something to finally satisfy you, because the dissatisfaction with maintaining that is so enormous. I mean, it is depressing, it's anxious, anxiety prone, it undermines our ability to function, wears us out.
Gives us something to live for.
What's that?
Gives us something to live for.
Well, think of that. You mean the idea that you're maintaining an idea that is empty and hollow and has no basis.
Well, I mean stuff in general, though, too. It gives like a reason to live.
Well, but if
there was no stuff, what the fuck would we be doing here?
Well, that's a very good question. So let's focus on that. let's say this wasn't just about trying to. You just admitted it. You're going to die one day. What's it going to be to you then? All that stuff. What is it to anyone?
It's going to be fine because I'm going to be where I need to be. I want to know what I could put in this vault with me. What do I get to take? So,
does this conversation interest you, or the one you typically maintain?
This one.
Yours.
Yeah.
So why do you come back to this conversation?
Oh, I see. Because it really helps. Otherwise, I get so upset that I don't have everything. This makes me like, it gets me through to the next day. It's like, okay, well, you don't have everything. You don't need everything. And then I just go, okay.
So you're mistaking the idea of being here for trying to feel better about something that you continue to maintain that's worse.
No, but it's getting better. Now I don't have to fight with anybody. The greatest part of this meeting I tell you about, there's no more fighting. Like anytime I go to fight, it's like, obviously, if we're talking about it, it's a possibility. So that's the reason I go to the meeting, to have a new outlook. I never have to fight with anybody. And I can use it as insight to me. It's a big chance I gave to them.
So you're seeing that there's something there that you might have not thought was there at some point. Okay, so if that's the case, and let's talk about this knowing nature that we talk about, this absolute knowing nature. If it exists, then it's essential. If the essence of this knowing nature is essential, could it possibly be that it's thinking about it incorrectly that causes and triggers that idea that we lack so much in the world, rather than we're lacking so much in the thinking we're doing about the essence of our nature, Anthony, mine and yours and everyone's. So if you start thinking about everyone and everything, you can't have much more than that. That's a pretty good example of having everything. Now, to have everything would still be including things. And to start seeing that nothing contains everything starts to expand that thinking to realize that things at some point are limited. But in essence, that is nothing, that is vast, that is completely incalculable and immeasurable and indivisible. If that's the source, then that's what you and I share, and we share it all of it. Whatever, we can't even define it because we've now gone beyond the end of things. We're not talking about everything anymore and all things. We're talking about something that goes way beyond that, because everything and all things couldn't exist if there weren't space beyond it for them to be. Right? So if that's your nature, just you and I here now, Anthony, just you and I. If that's your nature and that's our nature, and we connected around this very early on. I remember your whole response was you lit up, you laughed, you said you began thinking things you hadn't thought, but I would suggest you were starting to admit things you'd always known, things that felt very real because they were very, you had a sense of confidence that shifted.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it was that I liked all of a sudden. I can't remember. There's a
Well,
reason.
I suspect, good morning, Santiago.
Morning, Santiago.
If I remember right, Anthony, it was the point, it was at that men's retreat. It was at the
Yes.
point I made to that kid that the thing he had been struggling with that his mother did to him 18 years prior
Yeah.
was certain. She was down in Orange County and was no longer doing what it was he had bemoaned she did 18 years ago. And I suggested to him that it was his own memory and his own
Yeah.
repetition, his own resentment, his own anger over it that he was struggling with, not her at all.
Actually, the part that I thought was interesting about that conversation, more than that even, is that when he said he got a phone call, so he got distracted, and he started thinking about, like, what was I so worried? Like, he wanted to remember what it was that was troubling him. Like, I know that feeling. You know what I mean?
So it
Hi, guys.
disappeared. Yeah, it disappeared.
And then
Hi
he
guys,
wanted to bring it back.
do you hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
I have some problems to connect. Sorry to interrupt. Okay,
You look good, buddy. I like the haircut.
thank you.
Looks
So
great.
you were remembering him that he immediately forgot what the problem was.
Well, I was remembering how because I know that feeling where he gets off the phone. He's like, "Now, what was that I was so worried about?" Like he's trying to remember it so that he can work on it some more.
So in that description, you're identifying the fact that the thinking we're doing about the thing is so wobbly and such a thin veil. We think of it as real. We think of it as solid. We think of it as true. We think of it as there.
Right.
We literally believe it exists, but it's literally being maintained by our own resistance to reality and the pressure that's created as a justification to continue to worry and to have fear. We're actually creating those consequences in the maintenance of those ideas, drawing attention away, literally beginning to attend to things that are actually happening rather than things that are completely made up by this microscopic obsessive focus on them. All of a sudden realize they're not there except for the attention we're paying to them. And the only resistance that's there is the idea that they become real rather than simply imagined. We're just recalling things from remembering means they're dismembered before we remember them.
Yeah.
They're no longer members of society. They're no longer members of our thought. They're no longer, they become dismembered as quickly as we notice that they're just a thought we're having about something that isn't actually happening, but it's simply being thought to be happening in our own thinking. So if we can focus on that element in our discussion, a lot of the other things that we often talk about and that I get too embroiled in trying to unravel, which as far as I'm concerned helps give them credit for even existing, begins to diminish. And the question that you just asked, what would I do if I wasn't doing it? You think the purpose of your life is to collect things and have more stuff. And that's certainly something you can choose to do. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. Thinking it's the only thing you can do starts to actually lie about the fact that you can do anything you want. And it doesn't have to be those things you think are the only things. Addiction is the idea that the only thing we can do is the one thing we keep doing that we claim we want to stop doing once we notice it's killing us. So it's really that there's the mental aspect of it that becomes, to talk about it gives me the chance to have your perspective. And with Santiago, here's Santiago's perspective, to begin to see that I am made whole by the perspective, not only in my own consideration, but that of others who are also perceiving and conceiving of thoughts in relation to what's going on. Because if we look at what we share, the conversation changes dramatically because we start talking about the benefits we have to offer each other, rather than the irritations that we feel when someone points something out that we may also be doing, that they've learned and may improve in their thinking awareness. And I don't think thinking awareness is not our conscious awareness in the totality of consciousness. It's a thinking awareness. We're introducing our being knowing awareness that can't be disrupted, can't be unearthed, can't be buried, can't be found and lost, can't be more or less, can't be then and there, is always here. We're taking that and introducing it to our thinking by simply contemplating the concept that an infinite source isn't an option. It literally, in addiction, we think there is no choice. And here, the problem with the thinking we do is thinking that reality is a choice. It isn't. It's just a state of awareness. It's the state of existence. It's the natural state of all things that exist. Everything, everywhere, not just something somewhere. So to think in those terms literally relaxes thinking, because now thinking stops thinking it needs to get there, because the consideration is it's already here. It's already here. Now the question is, how buried has my thinking become that I think I need to continue to rely on it to unravel it, rather than just begin to actually practice principally and morally the fact that all I'm thinking about is stuff that has no basis in reality.
Yeah.
And it's my continuation of doing that, the addiction, this idea that I'm going to get better by doing it more or having more, when in fact
it
it's
opens up
principle.
such a bigger world, because in the morning, instead of thinking, oh, here's what's going on, now you could start with, God, anything could happen, anything is possible.
Well, think of that. That's a guarantee.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, anything possible is possible. Anything impossible is still not possible. And that's the distinction between sanity and insanity. When we think the only thing that's possible is the one thing that's impossible, and the thing that's possible, the thing that's happening now, is the thing that shouldn't be happening, and we wish wasn't happening when it is in fact happening, we're trading in assurance for doubt and uncertainty.
Well, yeah.
We're asking for those consequences as a guidance system to perspective, saying, wow, I must be off course here in my thinking to be having those thoughts that seem to be so repetitive and so damning and so depressing and so conflicted. And I would suggest, from experience only, that whenever I'm thinking those thoughts, I always have those effects.
Yeah.
So I've become, my growth, if I've had any, is that when I feel the effects, I don't have to think I'm thinking the things I'm thinking. I immediately know I'm thinking the things I'm thinking I don't think I'm thinking. It opens that doors to start to say, oh, I can live with this thing that I'm doing in peace, rather than create a new conflict that I'm trying to resolve in the world with somebody else or something else.
Yeah.
Follow that?
Yeah.
So the effects are actually like standing in front of a mirror. I'm going to see the image that I'm presenting to the mirror. If I have a mask on and think it's not me in the mirror, when in fact it's actually never me in the mirror, it's an image of me. But if I have a mask on and I think because I'm wearing the mask, I'm actually kidding myself, think of that. We fool ourselves. Fools rush in. Foolish thoughts rush in where angels fear to tread. In that old poem. What would the fool be? The one thinking that what's in the mirror is me. The image I'm seeing with the mask on can't be me, because I can't see the face. I can't face my face. And this is about really facing those facts, starting to look at things accurately and realize that we have a much greater awareness, because we have an absolute awareness that isn't something that's optional. It's not negotiable. It's an essence that must, in fact, then be essential if it is an essence. Now, I don't want to tell anyone, because I can't, my words have no bearing on anybody's decisions. But if you consider some of these things, your own experience, if you're willing, if you're really earnest and sincere in looking at this, you'll start noticing that you do have that awareness. And as you begin to even contemplate thoughts that are applicable because they're accurate, you will start noticing a shift in your awareness that will have you become the owner of the words that describe this, rather than think you need to understand my words to achieve it. Because it's not about my words at all. I'm just suggesting things and offering experience as a benefit to the fact that we're all intimately connected, that we're based on the same, our problems are essentially the same, our physicality is essentially the same, we're operating on the same basis and doing it in different ways to give ourselves the distinct credibility that somehow we can be alone, we can be apart, we can be separate, and all those other things that we tend to use to be depressed. And in the big book, the bedevilments are the list of those things.
Yeah. I started to watch people a little differently actually lately. knowing that whatever they're doing is something they want. Everything they do is for a reason. If they're walking down the hallway of a casino or whatever, they're trying to get somewhere. They're trying to do something. They're trying to have lunch. Everything is just a mechanical.
So their motivation is want.
Is what?
Want. They want
Yeah.
something. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on that point, if everything you do is based on something you want, we
Yeah.
want everything we get.
Yeah.
Now think of that in terms of absolute terms. I don't spend my day thinking I want everything I get.
Right.
I spend a portion of every day thinking I shouldn't have the things I'm getting and want something else. But I also know that in looking at that, it's showing me how much I rely on my thinking as being true rather than seeing it as a best guess and a best estimate and leaving room for learning along the way if I'm sincerely interested in achieving the things I want. But I've been living in this fantasy that fantasy is reality so long, I still think that my thought is so true that it's the only thing that's going to happen. And that's what expectations tend to be. When my expectations got to the point where I said, what's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah,
Things didn't
that's what we
surprise
talked
me
about
as much.
yesterday. Things
Yeah.
happened yesterday I never would have thought would happen.
Yeah.
But also, it's amazing to see how we're all able to do something on a certain level. Like as a species, we all can go to work. We all can drive a car. We all can go eat, to go put money in the bank and go to work and get a pay. It's just so much stuff that you just take for granted that everybody's able to do. Thousands, millions of people, all figure out the system. They can figure out how to order a sandwich, to tell the person what they want, to somehow have some money to give this person. And it's just amazing that they're all on the same level, millions and millions of people, billion people. And not a lot higher, there's not some people on some certain higher level, really. It's all pretty much the same. If that makes sense.
I think there are people that don't drive and don't go to work and don't have been disqualified for so long, they don't think there's any potential. And at the same time, there's other people that think that they have achieved everything because they have so much and yet struggle with the same emotional discount that the people at the other end struggle with and thinking they have no chance to actually ever achieve anything.
Yeah, well, the
So
similarities, I guess, is what was astounding me, that we're all so similar. We all do the same thing. We all go to the same little food court. We all eat it the same way. We all have these same TV, social. You can turn on your phone and watch something. You learn how to do that. It's just amazing.
Well, and the one thing I suspect we do differently is think, because we are free to think whatever we want. The chances that we're actually thinking the same thing as someone else is very rare. In some way or another, our experience, our history, our ideas, or all that stuff sort of comes to a point where my words aren't the final words. But my words are simply doing the best I can to express what I'm seeing in some vain hope occasionally that someone else can actually take them, translate them, see the spirit of them, and engage in a discussion based on something more than just simply the vocabulary and the sentence structure.
I was watching a show about this killer whale, and it attacked a shark because the shark was coming too close to a person or somebody. And they're talking about how the whales know to defend themselves. I'm like, how does this whale know? But it's a primary instinct for its kids. It knows to protect its own children. So it's taking that built in, whatever it is that, is created with this protection, it can do it on us. So that made sense to me. Like, okay, that makes sense. It knows protection because its own kids. And so it just takes it to something else.
So that's nature.
Yeah.
Sort of the urge to survive seems to be natural. And our instincts, in fact, recognize when something's wrong, which is why stress and anxiety are telling us that what we're doing is actually killing us.
Yeah, my friend who got sober for a little while, he said that's what he describes. He goes, my survival instinct kicked in. My body knew it was dying and it had to stop. It was a survival instinct.
Yeah. And yet the addictive instinct is that the only thing I can do is to continue to kill myself in the name of thinking someday I'll get better.
Yeah.
which is trying to ignore the pain, ignore the sensations that we're having in our body. We're turning it, it all gets flipped backward. So the instinct in addiction is to continue to do the thing. And my experience is that once I got sober from drugs and alcohol, which were a symptom, a compulsion, I began to see that the anxiety, the chemical ability I had to manipulate my chemical factory in my body was huge,
Yeah.
because I was doing a lot of things that created adrenaline rushes and stimulated me in ways that I realized were not healthy, because they were excessively utilizing my body for things that weren't happening. They weren't even
Yeah.
happening except in my own brain, my elevated heart rate, blood pressure, all that kind of stuff. Some of that is genetic, but if we're in a DNA structure that is adaptable, then it adapts to the environment. And if the environment we've been imposing on it in modern society is stress and anxiety, it's trying to deal literally with insanity and make sense of it. And so the body is beginning to break down and passes on deteriorative conditions that seem to be built into the DNA, because the DNA is struggling not with survival, it's trying to overcome an environment that isn't really there. It isn't like it would typically be dealing with the trees and the leaves and the foliage and the heat and all the elements that would be typical. This is now a completely induced state of seeming reality, which causes dramatic effects, but it has nothing to do with anything other than a thought of as reality, rather than simply an imagined event.
And we talk about intuition sometimes, and I'm just thinking right now, I have a hard time with what is instinctively knowing what to do. I think that has to do with reflexes. Like when a car's coming at you, you don't sit there and think about it. That's intuitively knowing what to do. Your body jumps out of the way because it knows what to do. It doesn't think.
Yes.
That's that intuitively knowing what to do.
So, Anthony, on that point, it would suggest, because I know that you struggle with this idea that thoughts are real, that if thoughts are reality and all that there is, would that intuition exist? Would that knowingness that doesn't rely on thinking exist if thinking is all that we have? If it was reality, it would have to be completely, reality can't be just real to the thought I'm having and then unreal to everything else, because it would discount the whole point of being real. Like truth, a part of truth is not the truth. So truth is either absolute or it isn't. The way we deal with it as humans is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, basically is a qualification, because we are known liars. We are known to promote ideas that have nothing to do with what actually happened. And generally we do that to try to protect ourselves from a perceived threat that we've created.
So where does that get us? So there's something more reflexes, or so once you put the thinking in between the reflexive process, and it slows everything down.
Well, I'm going to know it's the reactive thinking that's the problem. It's when I ask a thought to be something it can't be, I'm asking to overwhelm it. I'm asking to trigger literally a chain reaction, just like a nuclear chain reaction. I'm splitting the atom and I become a split personality, thinking all I am is what I think. And the contagion of that, I would suggest, is all the corrupt behavior on the planet that humans do. Animals don't do this. Animals don't have a hierarchy of dictatorship. They have lions who are in charge, for instance, of the pride, but they're there to protect the pride. They're there because they're the dominant male. They're going to do everything they can to protect the pride, or the dominant female. I forget which it is with lions. But whatever it is, when age or whatever it is sets in, another one comes along and takes the place for the betterment of everyone, not for the worst conditions of everybody, not for deteriorating.
And that silly lion thinks it's all for him. The new guy's going, "Oh, this is all for me," right? But really, he doesn't see the big picture, that it's not really all about him.
Well, they get the girls, so that's
that's what he's thinking. That's why it's the big picture. But it's really not. The big picture is protecting the whole herd. Like that's right. There's a big.
Well, and to your point that it's all the same, every pride has that makeup. Every pride has that to a degree. I'm sure there's variations, but to a degree, they got somebody in charge.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Assuming that the soul of the universe the ultimate source of life, has created us and creation to be free, joyful, and happy, how do you explain the suffering, or not even the suffering? How you explain that the gazelle gets killed by the lion? Can you talk about this, please? What are your thoughts or your feelings on this?
Gazelles are fast food in the animal kingdom.
Right.
I mean, it's a chain. There is a food chain that creates survival. But I think you're asking a different question.
Yeah.
A little more primary than that, Santiago. How can we, having been given that freedom, turn it against our own experience and against each other and use it so corruptly and so in such a contaminated form?
No, I am trying to, I don't know if I am asking that question, but many people said, well, you know, if God will exist, how come the wars? How come the violence? How come the abuse? And in that chain of events, you can go up to the gazelle. Why the gazelle gets killed by the lion? That's cruel. So, in other words, what I am asking your opinion on is how you perceive these wars, cruelty, famine, abuse, how that is compatible with a creator that has made us to be happy and free? That's my question.
Well, if the creator condemned us to limits, then maybe we wouldn't be doing those things we do. But my sense is we were given the freedom to think whatever we want. And the basis of any immorality and instability and unprincipled behavior is based on what we're doing, not what God is doing. If we have been given an infinite source and that infinite source gave us that freedom, ultimately, love is the guiding source. And if we are abusing it, that is on us. Not, it's interesting that we look to God as to why God would create us and have us do that, and not see God as a loving nature that has given us the freedom to do whatever we want. And these are things we want to be doing, to Anthony's point earlier. We want to be doing these things because we're trying to prove that all we are is human, and all we have is a brain, and our thoughts are reality and truth. And we've got to work harder and harder and harder against everything and everyone to prove it, while it's never been proven yet, and it can't be, because it's an impossibility. We've taken the greatest thing we have and minimized it, while taking the thing we don't have and tried to maximize it through this obsessive nature of addictive thinking, and thinking that thinking of itself creates ourself, which is effectively ego as a false self, constantly trying to fix that because we don't feel good about it, and not notice that it's the creation of it constantly, the reinforcement of that idea, that's causing the effects that we don't feel good about. It's our thinking that we're struggling with, not God's freedom. It's the mistaken ideas we're having about reality and about God that give us the impression that it's all up to us to become God, to become reality, to become truth through thinking harder, faster. That's obsessive thinking. We're trying to prove we're in charge by acting out of control and out of order, because we got the order wrong. If there's a primary source, that's primary. If there's a secondary source and we happen to have a brain, if we're misusing it, trying to create reality out of it rather than concede reality is already created and we're a byproduct of it, we're actually turning everything backward. And that's exactly what addiction is. It's a lie. It's a reversal of fortune. It's a reversal of any kind of goodness. It's an attempt to dam the dam and wonder why the channel no longer works, wonder why there's no flow, why we get stopped up, constipated, emotionally, spiritually. wouldn't be love if we were condemned only to behave according to loving dictates.
And something good always comes out of something bad.
Well, if essence of life is not the form of a gazelle or the form of a human, then the transition from this physical form would be very revealing, and there's plenty of evidence to that effect.
I see what you're saying there.
There's plenty of evidence. We talk about the afterlife and forget that that afterlife, if it's actual and real, must also be real during life. But we're so addicted to the wrong ideas we have about reality and truth, we can't imagine it could possibly be here given all the wrong things we do, and not notice that those wrong things are all based on an idea that thinking is reality and thinking is true.
That's interesting.
To your point earlier, Anthony, I wanted to read to you before Santiago got started.
Hey, then also, can you do me a favor real quick, Jack? Can you drop your camera a little bit? It's way high on you.
You like looking at me?
Yeah, thanks.
I wanted to get the rest of the room in.
Yeah. If I was an interior decorator, oh, that's much better. Thanks.
Okay. Intuition, definition. Direct perception of truth, fact, etc., independent of any reasoning process. Immediate apprehension. What is reasoning, Anthony?
Thinking.
Exactly.
Wow.
So listen to this. Independent. This is the number one definition for intuition.
Yeah.
This is real knowledge now. It's real wisdom. Literally, give me the wisdom to see the difference between the things I accept and can't accept. Think of the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Let's reverse it. God has granted me the serenity, and when I find conflict, I know I'm not accepting something as it is.
That's good.
Then the second part of it, help me understand the things I can control. What can I control? My thoughts. I choose my thoughts. If I'm thinking they're real, then I'm thinking all that should ever come from them is what I originally thought. And anybody, if I also think they're real, I think who I am is my thinking.
Right. All of a sudden it's making sense.
Anybody who doesn't think the way I do, I feel my life is threatened. And it says, God, grant me the wisdom to know the difference. God has granted that wisdom because we're not talking about a God that is somewhere else. We're starting to talk about the actual state of our being, present nature, now, here, as it is, not as we have thought it to be. And humans have historically and presumptively had ideas about nature that haven't been true, that we have operated on the basis of, that has caused great havoc until we came to terms with it.
Yeah.
So I want to read a little more on the intuition, though, because I think this is really the fact, truth, etc., perceived in this way. If we're starting to perceive in our thinking that a knowing nature isn't thinking, we start to relieve thinking of the job of trying to become reality and truth and simply process reality, deal with life on life's terms, because the terms are always being disclosed to us based on how well we are facing what's happening. If I don't face what's happening and think all that's happening is what I'm thinking is happening, I'm going to run into problems. If I think I'm going out the front door and I'm going out the back door, and I keep wondering why I end up going in the wrong direction, and don't correct the original thought that I'm going out the back door when I'm going out the back door, I'm just going to create this thing over and over again. And that's what we're doing. And to Santiago's question, this is in fact love offering us the option of fully engaging on a loving level, where we begin to recognize that the nature of this essence is loving and is beneficial, rather than think of that essence as being something that has condemned us to be what we are and do what we do without any choice. If we were not given the choice to have this freedom, we would have been condemned the whole time only to behave within the dictates of what looked right, but we'd have been condemned to, rather than having been given the freedom to do everything right and everything wrong, and notice and grow and develop and begin to actually reflect that in our experience and begin to live up to or within the absolute nature of knowing, rather than think of it as something we constantly have to get to, feel better about, get over, etc., because we're constantly up against this internal conflict about our thinking being reality and truth. If we think the most elementary thoughts about reality and truth are wrong, everything we do is going to be based on trying to fix that. And
No,
we
I
can't do
understand.
enough to fix it.
No, I am with you, Jack, that love is, it cannot be dictated that only you can behave in a loving way, because then it won't be love, because it won't be freedom. But going back to what we are talking, how you explain Auschwitz, how you
How do we-
explain
I didn't get your word. How do we explain the first?
the
Auschwitz.
concentration camps, the killing of millions of people.
Insanity.
Yeah, I know,
Insanity considered
but
to be in reality. That's exactly what it is.
No, I understand. But to that people, to those people that are suffering that, it's very difficult to say, well, you were created to be free, joyful, and happy. You say, well, I ain't
Well,
gonna be put. I'm gonna be put
here, but fortunately here right now, Santiago, we are not those people, and we have the potential to deal in an environment and begin to talk honestly without waiting until we are in such critically deformed conditions.
I understand that, Jack, but something that applies to us here in California, living in the very good way we are living, and doesn't apply to a guy living in Ethiopia, then is not a universal truth. So what I'm looking for is, if I was created to be joyful and free and happy, why the guy in Ethiopia, why the guy in the concentration camp is not? That's my question.
Well, you're thinking of it circumstantially and not in reality. Circumstances don't change principles. They don't change fundamental aspects of reality. Experience changes those things. Actions, deformed, insane actions change those things. Those people have that same freedom if in fact it's true. It doesn't mean they're experiencing it any more than it meant you were experiencing those things when you were doing whatever you did that you felt was out of control and killing you. And still today it's the same. And my sense is, Santiago, we have been thinking about this wrong so long, we really feel that we have no impact on everyone. And I will assure you, everything you do and everything you choose impacts everyone and everywhere that there is anything happening. It may not be perceptible in the most obvious way, but the effect is there in the same way. Just like the air, when we choose to take a breath of air, the air always seems to be there. It's the same air that everybody's breathing. The same gravity that's holding us to this planet, the same spinning and orbit that's allowing the seasons to occur and the plants to grow and feed us to whatever degree we're eating. It isn't to say what we're doing is fair. I would say what we're doing is largely discriminatory and exclusive and contaminated in terms of our thinking socially of how to deal with the resources we've been given. But it's gone on so long, why wouldn't people descend into those levels and make believe that somehow or another they've become God? I mean, it's really egomania, dictatorial, what do you call them, regimes want everybody to think one way. And anybody who doesn't think that way gets killed. All they're afraid of is a thought. The person in charge wants everybody to think he's in charge. They're gods, effectively. They're taking.
Would you rather have a God, Santiago, that always nothing could ever happen wrong in the world, where nothing gets hurt, or everything's perfect? Would that be a proof that there is a God?
No, I don't need that. I don't need that proof. I am just.
Or would you want that? Would you rather see that? Would everything be fine and you wouldn't have this question if everybody was happy like Santiago and there was no suffering?
Well, I know the question I'm asking is trying to empty the ocean one bucket at a time. It's impossible because it's, I cannot understand and I don't dare to understand, because is futile. It's like me trying to figure out what my dog feels when he smells something.
But
I
would you
can't.
rather have that? Is
It's
that
an,
would
it's
that make
another
Santiago
it's
happy?
an,
It's
it's
just a
another
question.
Anthony, he's explaining to you.
Santiago is happy instant by instant. Santiago has arrived, I think. I mean, I made many mistakes in my life. For a while, I thought that happiness was power and this, or a good glass of Chardonnay. But anyway, I think I am happy. But happiness happens instant by instant, moment by moment. So I am happy, Anthony. But I am asking a rhetorical question, really.
Yes.
Because frankly, I am writing something and I would like to wrap it in to prove that yes, we are created to be free, because I believe we are created to be free, and that happiness
but you're not hearing
is
you're not hearing my question. My question is, would you be happier if it was just everybody was happy? It's a simple question. It sounds like you're saying you're unhappy that people are suffering. Would you be happier if there was no suffering in the world?
I didn't say that I am unhappy because people are suffering.
But I think that's what you
What-
mean. I know you didn't say it,
No,
but I
but
think
that's not what I mean. Frankly, it's not my business. My business is, am I happy or no? That's my
well, that's a
business.
good answer.
If you're happy or you are not happy, that's your business. But I would like to understand if the principle is that we have been created to be happy,
Uh-huh.
that the creator didn't create us to be miserable and
Yeah,
suffer,
that's the
but
question I'm
create
asking.
us to be happy, and we are not happy, then must be individually that we have the responsibility to be happy or no. And now my question is, how a guy in Auschwitz or the gazelle that is about to be killed by the lion can be happy and in those circumstances? Follow me?
But
Has
there's
nothing
a
to do with me.
presumption here. There's a presumption here that whatever was created so that everybody could be happy. That's a presumption. And I would suggest if there are things going on like those people and we're happy, we're actually happy that those things are going on. And I would say to the degree that humans have been responsible for those things, and I don't think it's the same in nature, there's a food chain. It's specifically designed to support nature. Yes, the gazelle has a drive to survive and it's scared when a lion is about to eat it, but it's a natural course of events, not something that is imposed. We choose these things and subject people to those things out of a choice that's insane, and then seem confounded by nature and all the other things that seem to be working pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Yeah, that's a good.
My experience too with animals, and especially Pelayo, they're content most of the time. That being content versus discontent is simply beginning to actually say that there's a rootedness here. It doesn't, when I started getting clearer about what was going on, I started feeling sad and compassion for situations that I used to ignore and think because I wasn't experiencing them that I was better than them and was being graced when someone else wasn't. And I realized that's a very sick way to think. But I started realizing that it really hurt me to see people who are hurt, that I shared that with them in a very legitimate way. And if I was trying to be happy about that, I was trying to discount the circumstance by thinking there's nothing I can do about it, but to be exclusive from it. My sense is we're all intimately connected. There is very little between us that's any different, and most of it's just image on the surface. The guts of our experience or our bodies are the same. Not in every single way. There's different sizes and certainly different traits. But for the most part, we're all functioning off of a genetic platform that provides for the bodies that we have. And they've been manipulated and adjusted over time to deal with the environments we've been in. And if we're creating an insane environment, generation after generation, our body's capacity has actually been deteriorating in relation to how it's handling nature, because we're asking our brain to make sense out of something that makes no sense in terms of the insanity that we're creating in our own thinking. this addiction to thinking about thinking as being reality and who I am. So I would challenge anything that causes curiosity and look in any direction that causes that begins to cause a sense of sensibility. And my sense is we haven't been making sense out of things because we've been looking in the wrong direction at the wrong things to try to make sense out of, rather than start to notice that our own awareness of those things is very clear, and ignoring them is not the direction that honesty or a loving source would be offering in the fullest version. That would be a version of our own making that seems to be segregating us from that sense of totality that we share. I don't know if I said that very well, but
Well,
there. Yeah.
yeah, I am here. And I am thinking that because you like Pelayo so much, next time I leave town, I'm gonna drop it in your house.
He's the bouncing dog.
Will you take him for walks in the beach every day?
I don't know if it's legal down here, but people have been on the beach now with dogs like we did.
Hey,
in
so
Malibu.
can you answer anybody's question with the nature type of response? Let's say some caller or somebody says, I'm really upset because I want more. I'll just use that. You say, well, in nature, if you have too much, look at the way nature is. They don't want, is there a problem with an animal having too much? Not really, huh? I never
Well,
saw
think about it. The only animals that do that typically are squirrels and rodents, where they're storing
Yes.
up. They're storing up though for winter.
That is so interesting, just that in itself. Why is this one animal so like genetic? The others,
Well,
they don't
no.
tell each.
Bears do it. They just eat until they get fat and sassy and go to sleep,
Yeah.
and they're feeding off of what they've eaten. Look what goes on up in Alaska around just before wintertime at the end of summer. The bears have been eating, and the salmon they've got. They're not interested in humans. I've been fishing up there. They don't even pay attention to the humans. They've got so much fish.
Yeah.
But they're building up that the excess is generally to deal with something that's actually happening. Trees don't tend to drink more water than they need to grow as well as they can. If they did, they'd drown. They would drown the systems. If we drink too much water, if we drink too much water too quickly, we can kill ourselves.
Yeah. It's a good way to look at it. Nature doesn't want too much water or too much of anything.
It has what it needs, and that's a very different satisfaction than thinking always about what we don't have and need to get to feel fulfilled.
Yeah. Interesting.
So Santiago, I would say we're suffering an illness that has been misdiagnosed, even though it's been mentioned, and has been contaminating not only the species, but the planet, as long as we've been acting in these sick ways. And it isn't because we shouldn't be doing it. That's just a judgment. But if it is in fact the fact that we've been doing it, it might be worth looking at it from a non-judgmental sense in terms of it being should or shouldn't, and just simply look at it as a fact that it has been happening, and we have been central. It has been central to what we've been doing, to whatever degree we've been doing it. I'm not suggesting that everything going on the planet right now came from us, but that if there was anything that came from us, it might be worth noting and thinking about in accurate terms, so that we as principal players amongst that species could begin to be a form of either influence or a form of opportunity to start looking more honestly at what we're doing, and maybe begin to dispel some of the rumors that have led to such horrendous justifiable righteousness that has come to the conclusion that killing and harming other people is the only thing we can do to secure ourselves. Or other people, including the ocean, including the animals. We've overfished, we've polluted every body of water in the world, for the most part, has been polluted by humanity. The air, the oxygen that we breathe has been polluted through pollution, industrial pollution. Now, I'm not suggesting that the planet can't recover or that it won't. But if we continue, just like in our own lives, to maintain ideas that aren't true and think that recovery is overcoming the consequences constantly, we're going to be repeating those same behaviors over and over and over again, thinking that somehow or another the planet will heal while we're getting better and better at being worse in relation to how we're treating it, and not taking advantage of the opportunity to notice that nature is telling us everything we need to know, and we're denying it in the idea that nature is unnatural and that disease is natural and that healing is unnatural and all these other twisted contortions that we've been doing based on the idea that thinking is reality and truth, rather than simply imagine, where decisions are made that we are responsible for. And as Anthony pointed out, we want to make, because my sense is there's no choice made without a want behind it. Always. So to think we don't want what we get is to lie about the thinking we were doing, and it's again to overlook the fact that the source of the problem is in the thinking we're doing right now. Like you said, Santiago, every second, every moment.
Yeah, and we are what, I don't know if I will see it, but what we are going to get very soon is really a big question mark, because it's about having more, grow more. And that's, by the way, is the definition of cancer. Grow, grow. Today I was reading an article this morning before the meeting about this new company that has created these robots, these humanoids, that really learn from you. And they can clean your house, walk the door, walk the dog, all kinds of things. And they keep learning. And not only they learn individually, but all the robots of that company, when one learns, every other robot learns. It's like a federation. And
So
the
there's an
article was
assimilation.
right.
There's
And
an
the
assimilation of awareness.
Yeah, and they learn by looking at you, by the way.
Yeah.
So they look at how you tie your shoe. Next day, they tie the shoes for you. So what is going to happen to the workforce when all these robots that will be taking jobs, and humans will become, or most humans, the ones that do not have the power, will become just unnecessary, obsolete mouths to feed. So what is coming is a big challenge. And
well, that was also thought to be the case for the computer. People thought back in the 60s and 70s, when they were beginning to conceive it, that it would put everyone out of work, and look at the industries that have been created from it.
That's true.
I think the bigger issue, though, Santiago, is that we're looking at our capacity constantly to solve problems by creating something new, and not confront the problems as something that we're newly creating every moment by maintaining ideas that aren't true. And if
Yes,
robots, go ahead.
That's correct. Is the day I get is the same idea than the day I get the car, the day I get the job, the day I get the woman, the day I get the money, the day I get the robot that does all of this. That day my life will be better. Life doesn't become better from the outside. It comes better from the inside, in my experience.
Exactly.
Because
that's where your experience is created, is in the inside.
Yeah.
It's what you're thinking about, what's going on around you, that creates that experience. But to the other point too, Santiago, is if those robots can assimilate, to the point we were making earlier, if they can assimilate by watching, and then watching each other and actually just sensing each other, it confirms that if they can do it and they're a product of humans, we would certainly do it, being a product of reality and being a product of truth. And if we began to realize that we have an impact on everyone everywhere, we would think very differently about the culpability we have and the ability we have to influence those things everywhere and with everyone and everywhere, everything, everyone, everywhere. Those would become now possibilities rather than impossibilities, rather than perpetuate the mythology that we have nothing to do with it, and as a result can't do anything about it. We start thinking in terms that we absolutely have everything to do with it, and have very much to do with it, because what we're doing right now is impacting it. And to think we don't have anything to do with it is to think we can't do anything about it again. It just repeats this sort of common idea that is not true. So my sense is that the looking at things honestly would be to see what's unhappy as unhappy and align with it rather than think I need to constantly overcome it to create this wall of silence, this ignorance that I'm trying to create, maintain, when numbness for a sentient being is what death is. We're designed to be sensitive and designed to be aware. We're designed to interact on a level of knowing so that our thinking then can be employed to express that knowing nature rather than relied on to create that knowing nature. We've had it backward, so we're walking backward. It's like the Socrates used to say that we're walking. We see life as though we're walking backward. We only see what happens afterward, but we don't see what's coming. The fact is, if we've been doing what we've been doing long enough, we know what's coming. The sickness of addiction is often described as doing the same thing and expecting a different result. The real sickness is doing the same thing, knowing the result, and continuing to do it. That's the insanity. That's society in general, thinking that, well, it's all we can do. The best I can do is just have enough stuff to give me security, and everybody else gets to fend for themselves. That is not me as a participant of everything. That is me trying to be exclusive to everything. And why wouldn't I feel lonely and depressed doing that? And need happiness constantly to try to get myself out of it, rather than say, wow, if I'm responsible for if responsibility is the nature of nature and it's an absolute state of existence, then I am responsible for everything everywhere. And to see that is to see that that's also the same case for everyone and everything everywhere. Not just me alone doing it as though I'm the crusader rabbit and I'm going to fix it all, but starting to see, oh, we all have that. We are not acting that way very well. Maybe if I start doing it with the people closest to me and talk about it, maybe that becomes the next paradigm shift of thinking. Because if it's true, seeing it would come quickly, more than trying to see through this idea that reality is our thinking and that thinking is reality and that it's true and all we are and all we can do, etc. Has never come true and it never will be. That's an endless battle to try to do something that's impossible, when in fact, when possibility begins, it becomes possible very quickly for everyone if it's accurate, if it's real knowledge. My sense is we know knowledge because it wouldn't be something that's negotiable. It's not optional. We're just very, very paltry in our expression of it because our thinking has been relied on so long as knowledge rather than simply a process attempting to come to a conclusion that's the best one we can make at any given moment.
I don't know if I understand why I'm responsible for whatever is going on in Sri Lanka or whatever.
Well, would you have any concern about it if you didn't exist?
Repeat the question? No, I won't.
Okay, so let's
If
just
I
say that
didn't
because
exist.
you exist, if you exist and you're part of everything, then like a transmission, it's like a gear in a transmission saying, I don't belong to the rest, I'm on my own, I'm not. Everything functions together. Everything that's happening is part of the same thing. We all share the same air, the same gravity, the same rotational laws of gravity in the universe. We're all benefiting from those things, and yet we'd like to discount that we have anything to do with those things. I'm not suggesting that you've been pulling those levers, but if we've been pulling levers that have undermined humans' capacity to express a knowing nature that is applicable to all humans, we are certainly playing a part in pretending we have no responsibility about things that we are directly responsible for, because responsibility would not become a negotiable thing that I take responsibility. I am responsible by virtue of simply existing. Very different way to look at it, because we're shifting from relative thoughts and considerations to seeing things in absolute terms, which again are not negotiable or optional. They're just the way things are. I've never found things get better for me when I discount responsibility in the broadest way, because I become unaccountable. I start making excuses. I start blaming other people. I start having all sorts of other internal grinds. And when I start to accept absolute responsibility, I start looking at my own thinking and my own deficiencies as being central cogs in the problem, rather than something being caused by everything and everyone else. And I mean that in the ultimate way. I'm not good at that, but I suspect I've gotten better simply by talking about it. Some of these things are worth simply just considering rather than thinking of in terms of whether or not you believe them, agree with them, have faith in them, trust them, etc. The fact is, if we had all those things, we wouldn't be talking about this. We would be acting on this much more gainfully. So there would be less to talk about and more to actually do that was productive and beneficial and useful for others. But the fact that we do talk about it, in my estimation and my experience, is the fact that we haven't been talking about it honestly. And as a result, it seems like a foreign concept to even think of responsibility as something that isn't optional. It's just the natural state of existence. If we're here and we're interacting and we're present and everyone else is present, we must be present with them in the same way, based on the same thing, same essence, whatever it is. And that would mean everything that's happening is happening as a result of everything that's happening, rather than just the things I think I may or may not be doing or should be doing or they should be doing, or the ones that I directly affect and touch and manipulate. And when it comes to thinking, I would say that's fairly common amongst the entire species. And if we've been thinking wrong and we perpetuate that wrong thinking, we're going to get results that we're not going to be very happy to accept as having anything to do with us, because it would be insane to admit it. And that's the whole point of the discussion, is that we've been operating on an insane basis, thinking it's sane, and thinking the only sane thing we can do is to continue to feel better about it and try to get over it, rather than begin to concede it and begin to actually reckon with it and account for it in our own actions. If it's a disease and it's been undiagnosed, the chances are it's been getting worse a long time and hasn't even been noticed. And yet the byproducts, the effects have been noticed, the corruption, the contaminated, reactive issues, violence is a very good example
change
of
your
it.
mind? Does that change your mind, Santiago, about why you should worry about people in Sri Lanka?
I don't know if I understand exactly what Jack is saying. I understand parts.
So just
But
sit with it.
It's not about changing my mind. It's not like I am fixing one thing. I am asking a question.
But some of those things, Santiago, if you're beginning to consider something that you've maybe never considered, and yet you know it, if you simply consider it, you'll see yourself applying your thinking in a new direction. Just like if you consider 2 + 2 is 4 and begin to realize that the fundamental order of math is going to always work if it's applied properly. It just starts to, it isn't the sort of thing that you need to believe in. But if you begin to consider it, you'll see applicable purpose to it and start to see maybe some of the failings of the thinking you do more clearly and accept it because it becomes clear, rather than perpetuate the sort of mythology that you have nothing to do with it. My sense is that idea that we have nothing to do with it is really a suicidal death wish, because we're really hoping to not exist in relation to everything. Only the things we think we should be connected to, because we think about those things, when in fact, if everything is everything, we're related to everything regardless of what we think about it. Just like if there's an infinite source, it's irrelevant to that infinite source what we think. It's only relative to our experience in terms of the depreciated, destructive, degraded, deformed, destabilized thinking that we end up struggling with. So just sit with it. If there's something absolute that's responsible for everything, that responsibility would also be ours, because we're a product of that. I didn't make my body as far as I remember. And there were points in time when I didn't think, and yet my body seemed to be taken care of. There seemed to be a universal something going on that allowed that to happen. Even if it was just my parents doing what they did, they had an instinctual idea about what it was they needed to do to make sure that I survived. So that responsibility becomes a little more clear as you start looking at it from a point of view of absolute responsibility rather than selective relative responsibility. It's the same as truth. You think of truth only as you think of truth. That doesn't make it true, because at the ends of that truth would be everything else that would disprove that truth. My sense is our fear is created by making believe things that aren't true are true, and we know that beyond the limits of those thoughts, everything else would disprove that in a nanosecond, because it can't be proved in all the time we take trying to prove it. It's all just illusion operating as reality, and illusion operating as reality is delusion. Just stuff we've made up and stuff we live by and stuff that culture we've inherited from this conversation that's been going on a long time, that it doesn't make it real, it doesn't make it true, it makes it really true that we continue to perpetuate it. And yet the perpetuation is delusional. So I wouldn't say there's much to it. Once it's looked at accurately, it dissolves as quickly as fog disappears when the sun comes up. Probably even quicker, like a heavy wind.
So, but John wasn't here, I don't think, but Santiago's question, are you there, John?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what was your question? Because John didn't hear it, Santiago, about God.
You don't remember my question?
Well, it's better I remember
That
it,
was
but
my question.
it's better
That
if
was gonna
I
be
come.
my question.
I don't want to misphrase it, so I'd rather have it come from you.
Oh, but
What was your question?
how I know that when I ask my question, you won't interpret or hear it in a different way that
Right,
I'm
that's
asking
why
the
I'm
question.
asking you to do it again. That's what I'm saying. That's a high possibility of it.
Let me suggest though, Santiago, to
Yes,
the
sir.
degree that we're thinking obsessively, we hear only what we think is being said, and we see only what we think is being seen. It has nothing to do with what's being said and has nothing to do with what's being seen. And that's a pretty sick twist to begin to notice that's
Well,
how most
the question that I heard him ask was, if there is a God, why does he allow so much suffering in the world? Why are some people having to go through this if there is a God?
Yes, that's basically the question. How you explain that?
So what would you say, John?
I'd say, who gives a shit? It's a premise, right? Santiago says, if your aunt had balls, she'd be your uncle. It's a premise. I have no answer for that. What about you, Jack?
Jack had a good answer, actually. Jack had a good answer.
What's that?
Oh, Jack,
He wants to know your
response because I wasn't here.
I
forget the question.
Jack said that's just people acting insanely. That's not whether or not there's a God. There's people acting insane, and you can't judge that. I think that's what you were saying, right?
In other words, where I am going is Robert De Niro once was asked, "Do you believe in God?" And he said, "No, I don't believe in God. And even if God exists, it has a lot of explanations to do, because we were humanizing God, right?
Yeah.
And according our 3 or 4 dimension world, and according our limited amount of understanding and perception, we think, well, if God is there, all of these horrible things that happen should not be happening. God won't allow that, right? Or if he is there, like De Niro said, it has to give a lot of explanations and explain why he allowed Hitler, or the famine in Tanzania, or the life of a homeless, etc. So that is where my question was pointing, to see how you will answer Robert De Niro. I said, Mr. De Niro, you are a great actor, but please consider that. That's what I was asking.
Again, to the opening of your reclarification, Santiago, is that if we've humanized God, we've once again made believe that what God is and who God is and how God is only what we think of God. So isn't it interesting that we would now blame God for having given us the freedom to do whatever we want, and what we wanted to do were those 6 things, and now ask God why he allowed us to do those things when we've been given the freedom? Only insanity would allow those things to happen. That isn't a function of God being insane. That's a function of us acting insanely in relation to the freedom we've been given to do what we want. The question is, why do we continue to do it, thinking we're going to figure things out, we're going to get the answers? We keep seeking while we're not simply admitting what we're looking for has never been lost if it's absolute. If it's true, it can't be found because it can't be lost. It's an essence that is essential. It is an absolute state of being that we all know, because if we didn't, we would be more powerful than it to exclude it from our experience. We suffer because we know better. We wouldn't suffer if we didn't know better. And that is the reckoning. That's the accountability. That's the responsibility in the nutshell. We know when something's wrong, and we don't feel good about it.
Anthony, how will you answer Robert De Niro?
I like Jack's answer a lot. I wouldn't have had it a few minutes ago, but I liked that a lot. And then my dad told me a long time ago, because I would ask that question about something like, well, how did this happen? But there's some good always comes out of some bad. Like, no matter what it is, you give me any example, and there's some positive that happens. When the deer gets eaten, the positive is the lion keeps going, you know?
Well, yeah, tell that to the girl in Namibia that is raped by 10 guys and then they cut her teeth.
Well, only the strongest people, like at some level, it makes the strong survive. You know, when
but isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that we will use excuses of distant places and yet not look at the excuses we're making in this place right now to have a conversation about something that's absolute, and see that the contaminated potential is starting right here with each of us? To any degree we make believe that somehow or another it is, we don't know more now, we can't talk about it, we have to use all these other excuses to write it off.
Jack,
we're doing it now.
all of that is fine, but Jack, all of that
I don't think it's fine.
But I am Robert De Niro.
I wouldn't come back every week if I thought it was fine. I would say this is
hear
a major
you, Jack,
disease.
I hear you, Jack, but I am Robert De Niro. I have 3 Academy Awards, 40 pictures, and I think God should be giving a lot of explanations for all this shit.
Okay, so he has a thought.
But you said to that.
So what? So he has a thought, and I would say that thought is built on
Anthony,
the idea
in your
that we're not responsible.
Anthony, your query to me, listen to the language of the conversation, right? The language is that the gentleman keeps using the word should. Those are all judgments, right? In answer to that, Jack says belief. It's all about what the language is saying of the people that are speaking. It's not about the topic.
What I said about belief is that it isn't required. Belief and faith and all these ideas we have about things, if things are true and real, it's irrelevant whether we have belief in them or not. Our belief is irrelevant, and yet to our thinking, if we take a position that these other things, if we take the position that things that are absolute and true and real don't exist except to our belief, we now become the creators of truth and reality. And I would say that's a major flaw of thinking. And that's precisely why we blame and shame others, including thinking God should do it some other way, because we think of God as a big man in the sky who's invisible that we can continue to poke blame at, when in fact it's our own doing right here now between us, that if it's deficient in any way, we are contributing to deficiency in every way within the scheme of all that we're doing as a species and all that happens beyond us.
God should. That's what you said.
What's that?
God should. So the thing is that it's
I'm talking about within the confines of
in
the
my
idea
opinion,
that
it's
God
not
is a
about the
human.
thinking, and you're gonna run me over. Okay. So I'm trying to say that the gentleman believes, right, in what he believes, right? And you say it doesn't require belief. But the thinking to get powerful, the thinking that causes him to analogize Robert De Niro or some rape or whatever it is that you say is far away, is his belief in what should be and what should not be. Am I not right, sir?
I don't know. I would leave that to him to answer.
You're absolutely wrong.
That's why I called him sir and not Jack.
You're absolutely
Santiago.
wrong. You are dead wrong. You are completely wrong. You are 100% wrong. That's my answer.
Tell me why, sir. Tell me why.
Because I say so. Because I say so.
Well,
am
you, sir, your
I
opinion is only worth something if I give it worth.
John-
I am fucking with you, sir.
You have said several times.
No, I
that-
would like an answer. You don't have to fuck with me.
No? I haven't fought with anybody in a long time.
What'd you say, Santiago?
I haven't fought in a long time.
It sounded right to me, John. I don't know. Santiago, I guess, is the ultimate word on it, but it sounded like exactly right. Everybody's dealing with their window. They see the world through their window.
Well, maybe the answer
And
to
it's
Mr. Robert,
colored.
maybe the answer to Mr. Robert De Niro will
It's
be
not.
yes.
It's not about your thinking. It's what you do.
Yes, but that's about your thinking. It's very much about thinking in terms of how we utilize it or misutilize it. That's true. That's a distinction.
So, Jack, you think the correct answer to Robert De Niro will be, Mr. Robert De Niro, when you want to get God responsible or explain why and this happen, could you tell me why do you make such violent pictures? Can you explain that? And do you think the violence in your pictures has
Ooh, that's a
something
good
to
point. Yeah.
has something to do with the violence in the world? Jack, do you think that will be the right answer?
I haven't even tried to concoct an answer
I
to
like that
Robert De
answer.
Niro not being here. I'm doing my best to deal with the thinking that's going on now here with us, rather than come up with all kinds of other obscured ideas about it. And I think that JP's comment about it's what we're doing with thinking. Thinking by nature is in fact designed to express the knowing nature of our existence. If we're trying to make believe the thinking we're thinking is reality and truth, we are now doing something with it. We're utilizing it in a way that's completely non-utilitarian, because it turns against our whole experience, because it isn't dealing with things in the proper order. It's putting thinking ahead of reality and truth, rather as the creator of it, rather than the byproduct of it. And that window that you're talking about everybody seeing is a lens of that understanding and those beliefs and all of those things that come out of it. You seem to segregate, John, thinking from belief, but belief is basically faith in a thought being true. That's all that it really is. So they're connected intimately while they are distinct by definition.
What is the belief?
Yours often is that you need more. And I would suggest it's because what you're thinking is less. And when you're relying on thoughts that are deficient, you're going to think filling them up with other things is the only thing you can do, because within the context of that thinking that circulates on itself, you're going to think about thinking being deficient and think you have nothing to do with it, to the point of responsibility. You have nothing at all to do with it. And as a result, the only thing you can do is continue to feed it. Can you hear me still? Can you hear me still?
I hear you, yeah.
I
Okay.
hear you.
I just got a beep that it went out.
I don't think John's on this. John.
I think we might have lost him. He was in his car. But he made a good point. It's how we utilize thinking. It's not thinking that's the problem. It's how we utilize it. But thinking about thinking, think of that. Thinking about thinking itself tends to suggest that when we think thinking is true, tends to suggest that thinking about itself becomes us, ourself. And to think that means that we are now the creator of reality and the creator of truth. And the only thing that should ever happen is what we originally expected when we had that thought. Every subsequent thought starts having an expectation attached to it that's only based in what we think. So everyone and anything that happens along the way that doesn't align with that seems to threaten our existence, because who we think we are now becomes only what we think. It isn't true. It's a complete delusion. It's an induced state of insanity, which I would distinguish from other forms of insanity, which may be out of our control, but I don't suspect they ultimately are. I suspect they're all byproducts of this same contaminated form of thinking that indicates the body is breaking down under the weight of trying to accomplish something that is impossible. It's living in an environment that doesn't exist as though it's all that exists. And the body was designed to actually deal with, and our senses were designed to deal with what's actually happening, not what we make believe is happening, what we think is happening, what we think should be happening, and all that other stuff that we layer on it. So that's something we're perfectly capable of dealing with here without drawing in other instances and other big, broad philosophical questions. The question is, why don't we do it while we're together? Openly and honestly. Here, now, think about these things in absolute terms and start to shift the dynamic of the conversation we might not normally have that can be filled with
Robert De Niro's not here though.
He's connected to this conversation somewhere, but you are here and we are here. And it would be worth probably considering that and beginning to look at what is assured. What's assured about the freedom, as far as I can tell, is that if we're free to do what we want, that includes doing things wrong and thinking they're right. That's included in that freedom. It does not become the exclusive need until we begin to think that the freedom we have is condemned by the thinking that we're doing. Does it become the thing we think is the only thing we can do? And that becomes a very sick proposition. And those things you talk about out there, Santiago, that humans have done and are still doing today, are byproducts of that kind of egomaniacal, narcissistic, self-indulgent, self-possessed, self-induced state of thinking. Not an accident, not a coincidence, a direct descendant.
Well, I'm gonna go, but before I leave, I want to share with you something that I heard in a meeting a couple of weeks ago that really made me laugh, but at the same time think about it. So it's this dear guy, I really love this guy. And he's talking about the mind. And he said, look at what happened to me the other day. I was considering buying these things from Amazon, and I realized I don't need them. But eventually I go and buy it, the damn thing. And then after I bought the thing, I said, you know what? This is stupid. I don't need this thing. I'm going to cancel the order. So he goes back to Amazon and discovers that the order has been delayed for 2 weeks. And now he gets pissed. How come my order is delayed? Is delayed. So he calls Amazon and asks, I have ordered this, and now it's going to be 2 weeks delayed. What's going on? And Amazon tells the guy, well, the problem is with the manufacturer in China. And well, but this is not customer service. And he went on and on and on. Finally, he asked for the phone number of the manufacturer in China to call the manufacturer in China to argue about the delay of the thing that he knew he didn't want to anyway. So is that doesn't illustrate the works of the mind?
That isn't the mind, and it isn't the thinking. It's the observer making the choices that subject the thinking to those things. This isn't just happening, Santiago. These are choices we're making in the process of utilizing our thinking that are completely insane choices. And then blame it on thinking, like we blame it on God. We blame it on Robert De Niro's question. These are things we're choosing. These are things we're manifesting. The effects we're creating are all chosen. They are freely chosen by us. That is the responsibility.
Yeah, of course, that's the funny part of the story. Exactly.
Well, and
anyway,
also the sad part is he really went down that road making believe that it was everyone and everything else that was causing the problem.
Yeah, but the next day he was laughing, thanks God. Anyway, yeah. I am leaving. Love you guys. Thank you, Jack, for the meeting.
All right.
Thank you, Santiago.
Bye, Anthony. Good to see you.
Boy, that was an interesting morning. I love you, buddy.
So my sense is we struggle to talk about this openly and honestly where we are as we are. And as a result,
if we're even discussing it, obviously that's a possibility. Not only do I not talk to others right, I talk worse to myself and have a harder time communicating with myself.
Well, and ultimately, Anthony, in this discussion, if we begin to see that it's the internal dialogue that we have with a self that doesn't exist except to the ideas we have, we're really thinking.
Hey, listen, I figured out the whole thing. My whole life, I always wished I was Hugh Hefner. Guess where I'm going to be buried? In the fucking place that Hugh Hefner. It's like, you be careful what you wish for. This was the place that Hugh Hefner purchased for himself. And then he ended up getting one closer to Maryland, so he sold it. So that's what I got, exactly what I wished for.
I think we're dealing with something a little bit more profound than that.
That's my idea of profound.
I know, exactly, why you keep coming back. If the essence of our nature, if we're not talking about the essence of our nature, we're going to create very unnatural consequences to make believe they're so compelling and so fascinating.
Yeah, that's what we learned. I like your confident pose. Like you figured it out right now too, right? Like you look confident.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how that looks, but my sense is it can be, I am disturbed by the amount of time spent going in every other direction than beginning to contemplate some of the most elementary ideas and concepts that are fully assured, like the fact that everything is possible allows for everything that happens to happen.
Yeah.
To sit around and ask why it's happening and not acknowledge that it's happening.
Or try to come up with every possible thing. I was always trying to think of every possible scenario, and I couldn't have thought of everything.
And yet what happens, and we are assured of that. And if things are happening today that shouldn't be happening, and they're happening, what we think should or shouldn't be happening is irrelevant to the fact that we have great assurance about the fact they are happening. There are people struggling to have enough water. There are people, there's plenty of food on the planet. There are people starving to death. There are people who are being starved to death as a result of thoughts, ideas that are right for one and not for them, apparently. There are all kinds of things going on in this universe or in this world that we mistake when we haven't taken the time to actually begin to talk about it openly, because we are reliant on one another, we are dependent on one another, and to not take advantage of that dependence and begin to utilize that reliance would be to perpetuate the mythology that we think is our own and the only thing that exists. And that to me would be just to continue to cascade down
or the universe. The universe is so unknown, so fascinating, and we can start our morning off by being upset that cereal isn't right, you know? Take it down to some minute level where so much, apparently everything is going on, but I don't see that, right?
Yeah. And yet you're welcome not to like cereal. You know, the difference, Anthony, isn't that all of these problems go away. To begin to see them clearly is to begin to see that they are problems and begin to stomach them, meaning live with them, rather than to try to do things that give us the impression they're not happening.
Yeah.
Start to literally notice that we have a very keen awareness of them. And when those things are not good, we do not feel good. And not feeling good is actually the right, it's the alignment of our ability to reckon with those things rightly, rather than wrongly make believe the only thing we can do is pretend they're right, and that it's the only thing we can do, and we've got to escape it and feel better about it. And what I need to do is go run 30 miles or do something to feel better, rather than say, wow, I am keenly aware of things that are wrong, and I don't pay much attention to them before I react and impulsively overact to try to escape them. Even within sobriety, this goes on. And it can be depressing because it is not enlightening. It is a repetition of a diseased idea that somehow the more thinking we do about it, and the thinking based on thinking, if the thinking is insane, is just going to be new insane ideas following.
And again, JP had a good point. It's not the thinking.
No, it's our utilization of it, and misutilization and mistaken identity. It's a good clarification.
Did you like how I was able to repeat Santiago's question for the win? That was pretty good, right?
Well, listen, it's simple, but the underlying spirit is really the question. It isn't so much the words, but the spirit. And we often get stuck on the words and don't get the spirit of the question. And the spirit of the question is, why do we blame God and take so little? We sit in this conversation and debate whether or not we're responsible, and then wonder why God doesn't do something about it, why God isn't more responsible. Think of that. We can't even come to terms in a conversation with being absolutely responsible, but yet we sit and ponder as to why God would allow these things to happen, while you and I are directly related to all the other people that are doing those things right now, right here. I don't have to agree with that for that to be the case. I don't have to believe in it for that to be the case. The fact is, we are part of a species of people that are alive. We are all interacting. We are all interdependent. We are all interacting, acting, dependent, interdependent, etc. Constantly. There's no division. Ultimately, we are held by the same gravity. We function on the same basis. We are working within the laws of nature, and we want to struggle with the terms of life and think that somehow it's up to our thinking to resolve it, rather than begin to utilize our thinking to align with it and start to express it in a way that's actually meaningful and purposeful for others.
Hey, have you ever heard the George Carlin version, Modern Man?
I don't remember exactly.
I think we talked about this with somebody else, maybe. But it's a great skit about that. He says who we, and only George Carlin can do it way of who we've become. He goes, I get hate mail from my love child. He breaks down like, heck no, man. I'll send it to you.
Well, it's twisted. Humor is looking at the ironic twists that we think are reasonable until somebody actually points them out. And then they're very funny because we're not as sad bemoaning them and being depressed over them. And irony ultimately is revealing that that things aren't as black and white as we think they are. There's simply both things, a position taken in relation to other things that seem to be the only position we can take. Those are lockstep decisions we make to make believe that who I am and what I am is all I think. And at that point, nothing anybody else says is going to get through, because I've decided all I am is what I think. And that's all I'm going to do is keep thinking about what I think. Versus say, well, maybe if I'm more than that, maybe others have something to say. Maybe there's some good information out there. And maybe actually what's happening right now is my curriculum to correct and to learn and to grow and to begin to get wrong as wrong, rather than think of new ways to have it right.
Just as a laugh, I'm going to read you just a little bit of it. It's amazing how smart the guy is. But look at it says here. It says, let me get rid of this. It's George Carlin, Modern Man. I'm a modern man, a man for the millennium, digital and smoke-free, a diversified, multicultural, postmodern deconstruction that is anatomically and ecologically incorrect. I've been linked up and downloaded. I've been inputted and outsourced. I know the upside of a downsizing. I know the downside of upgrading. I'm a high-tech lowlife, a cutting-edge, state-of-the-art, high-tech, low-life, cutting-edge, state-of-the-art, bi-coastal, multitasker, and I can give you a gigabyte in a nanosecond. I'm new wave, but I'm old school. I'm inner child is outward bound. I'm hot-wired, heat-seeking, warm-hearted, cool customer. I'm voice-activated and biodegradable. I interface with my database. My database is in cyberspace, so I'm interactive, I'm hyperactive from time to time, so I'm radioactive. I'm behind the 8 ball, ahead of the curve, riding the wave, dodging the bullet. I'm pushing the envelope, I'm on point, on task, on messaging, and off drugs. I've got no need for coke and speed. I've got no urge to binge and purge. I'm in the moment, on the edge, over the top, and under the radar. A high concept, low profile, medium range, ballistic missionary. I'm streetwise, smart bomb. I'm a Top Gun bottom feeder. I wear power ties. I tell power lies. I take power naps and run victory laps. I'm totally ongoing Bigfoot, slam dunk rainmaker with a proactive outreach, a raging workaholic, a working rageaholic, out of rehab, and I'm in denial. I've got a personal trainer, a personal shopper, a personal assistant, a personal agenda. You can't shut me up. You can't dumb me down because I'm tireless and I'm wireless. I'm the alpha male on beta blockers. I'm a non-believer and an overachiever. I'm laid back, I'm fashion forward. I'm up front, I'm down home, I'm low rent, high maintenance, super size, long lasting, high definition, fast acting. I'm over ready, built to last. I'm a hands-on, footloose, knee-jerk, head case, prematurely, post-traumatic, and I've got a love child that sends me hate mail. But I'm feeling, I'm caring, I'm healing. I'm sharing, I'm supportive, bonding, maturing, primary caregiver. My output is down, but my income is up. I took a short position on a long bond and my revenue stream has its own cash flow. I read junk mail, I eat junk food, I buy junk bonds, and I watch trash sport. I'm gender specific, capital intensive, user friendly, and lactose intolerant. I like rough sex. I like tough love. I like the F word in my emails and my software on my hard drive. It's hardcore, not soft porn. I bought a microwave in a mini mall. I bought a minivan in a mega store. I eat fast food and slow lane. I'm toll-free, bite size, ready to wear. I come in all sizes. I'm fully equipped, factory authorized, hospital tested, clinically proven, scientifically formulated medical miracle. I bring pre-washed, pre-cooked, preheated, pre-screened, pre-approved, pre-packaged, post-dated, double wrapped, vacuum packed, and I have an unlimited broadband capacity. I'm a cool dude. I'm the real deal. Lean and mean, cooked, locked, and ready to rock. Rough, tough, and hard to bluff. I take it slow. I go with the flow. I ride with the tide. I've got glide on my side, driven and moving, sailing and spinning, jiving and grooving, wailing in the pedal to the metal, and the rubber on the road. I party hard, and lunchtime is crunch time. I'm hanging in. There ain't no doubt. I'm hanging tough. Over and out.
Well, I'm happy for that ending. I had heard that. Now, you must have had a point.
That the guy's a fucking genius.
Okay, how does that apply to our discussion? How do you see that?
No, from the line where we said he gets hate mail from a love child, and we were talking. Oh, because you were saying something that was reminding me of this George Carlin routine, where you were saying how we do this, and we're it was in that same format of how he delivered that joke. We're not we don't care about people. We care about this. We don't have, you know. So it sort of brought me to that. I just wanted to make sure you had heard that before.
I did. But the point is, Anthony, being here, you and I, we can go to great lengths to avoid the opportunity to actually discuss things honestly between us, you and I.
Yeah, But isn't that a
And-
great routine? Going back to the routine, I think he brings up a lot of great quotes. He tells the modern man, that's who we are. I mean, it's just, we're talking about what makes us. There's so many things.
Yeah, well, all of those things are here right now. All of them are present. All of them are available to be discussed. And the opportunity to do that is immediate, spontaneous.
Dude, what if I would have said this? What if my friend, when he was saying, you know what the truth is, Anthony? And I said, it's right here. It's not what about what I think it is. It's here. Would that be a good answer?
You know, again,
Is that true? Is that
you're
a true
not
statement?
listening. You're really
Is that
not
a-
listening to what I'm saying. You're on a manic run, as far as
No,
I
what
can
I'm
tell.
saying is that true that it's
Anthony,
here?
right here, right here, right here.
That's
What's
what I'm
true
saying.
here? What's true here?
That's what I'm saying. That's
What
the
are you
question.
saying?
What?
What's true here is not a question. What's true here?
Yeah,
What's true here is not a question. You keep asking
right. That's what I'm
questions.
saying. That's the true statement is what I'm asking you. It's true.
Why are you asking if you're saying it?
It's like a comedy routine. Did you ever see Abbott and Costello?
What's true here? What's true here, Anthony?
Is that we're here?
Okay. What else would be true here?
That's it.
Okay, so that's always true,
Yeah.
that we're here.
Yes.
May not be when our bodies are gone, because it won't be a here and a now, it'll just be a present state of knowing. But for human life, for this experience we're having, that's probably accurate enough to rely on as a starting
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
Okay.
You don't need more than that.
So now, here's what's interesting about that, Anthony. That applies to everyone else too, and everything
Yeah.
else, right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now. Okay,
Yes.
so if that's assured, there's no question in it, there's no doubt, there's no uncertainty.
All right.
So that would be a principle, human principle maybe, within the confines of this limited experience we're having in a relative universe. And yet we have an absolute awareness of it to be able to consider things that are true enough to be true for everyone, everywhere, all the time. So that's the goal of the conversation here, is to look not for how many questions we can ask, but how we can begin to address what isn't questionable, because it isn't optional. It's not insecure, it's not in doubt, it's not uncertain, it's absolute. That conversation will shift the rest of that thinking more than more thinking about that thinking will ever do anything more than create more thinking.
Good job, Jack.
Well, if it were a job, rather than a daily effort, you know, that might be good and bad. There's a lot of good and bad in it, Anthony, because I don't like it all. I don't need to love what I do to like it. I don't have to like it to love it. And there's a lot I don't like. There's a lot I come up against that really makes me feel wary, because I'm in the midst of a world that has lots of thoughts and ideas that I am participating in that are not always healthy, are not always absolute in any kind of immediate term to stabilize them, and that I can feed off of and run a little rampant on and run out of order, self-will run riot sort of thing, where all of a sudden I'm off in multiple directions. I notice what those directions are much quicker than I ever have before. It doesn't mean I'm still not prone to it. And the only thing I keep coming to is that I keep thinking in limited terms to be feeling those things so limited as to my experience, because I'm not thinking as globally and as universally as I can to make all things become part of what I'm thinking about, rather than just some things. To begin to think in those terms begins to make very little out of the little things that I can make so much of, and begins to actually make something out of everything, which becomes pretty profound, because now that to me would be a much more enlightened way of walking through this experience, because it would be inclusive of everything rather than finding all kinds of different ways to be exclusive to that. And reactive obsessive thinking is constantly attempting to isolate itself because of the fear of knowing it's not true, being exposed by any potential exposure it gets, just like darkness is immediately disappeared when the light's turned on. Cannot withstand it.
Yeah, I like when my friend Larry, he would say, just because the circus has left town doesn't mean just because the monkey's off my back doesn't mean the circus has left town.
Or that the clown went with it. So think of that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. If it's foolish thoughts rushing in because of a manic nature to obsessive thinking, it isn't, I am not a fool for having foolish thoughts. I am just having foolish thoughts that I am responsible for having and creating. And why do angels fear to tread? Because angels would be angelic. They would not be demonic, in that demonic is the beginning of demonstrate. Demon, demonstrate. If I'm demonstrating in favor of sick ideas, where angels fear to tread is where lies are reality, because they don't exist. They're completely delusional. They're based on hatred and fear and loathing and violence. All of that is coming out of that thinking. If we're doing it, you and I together, and have a difficult time even talking about it openly, why wouldn't the world be doing what it's doing exactly the way that it's doing it right now? And we now know from what we just said that it is doing exactly what it's doing right now, exactly as it's doing it. It doesn't mean it's happy. It doesn't mean it's sad. It means it's doing what it's doing. And to start coming to terms with that is to start to actually stand on a platform where thinking is being introduced to a knowing nature, and then can be utilized in order, proper order, rather than out of order, out of control, can be utilized in that way. It's a channel to express the knowing nature that is inclusive of everything, rather than something specific and distinguished from everything as something we can claim to be our own and wonder why we suffer from self-doubt and feelings of inadequacy and feelings of insecurity and all that. We're creating those effects. And if we were sentient beings and sensitive to that sentient nature, we would be knowing those effects are coming as a result of what we're causing, because we would be seeing thinking as simply something we're doing rather than something we are. And the only thing that we can do to continue the wrong is right, to try to get it right someday, somewhere, somehow, with more or less of something else, someone else, somewhere else. That would stop. It would start becoming obvious where we are, that what we're struggling with is what we're doing presently, now, not what happened in the past. The greatest trauma is to make believe that the past is somewhere else that we can never get to. That's horrifying to live with on a daily basis. So for past trauma, post-traumatic stress to be post rather than seen as present is to once more complicate and reinforce the trauma in the name of trying to get better all the time, when in fact we're actually thinking of it in a place that doesn't exist, we can't possibly get to. So I suggest that to you. I'm glad that we had a little more time today. You've been, involved in this conversation for a long time. You have manic tendencies. You get obsessed. I do too.
And I haven't had my coffee yet. For the listeners at home, the reason I'm manic is that I need coffee to make me mellow out a little bit.
Well, what's interesting in things like that, Ritalin helps kids with ADHD that can't pay attention, and it's really speed to help them slow down.
Exactly.
It helps them slow down because it's the opposite. So this whole structure of anxious disorders and all that, they're disorders because we're thinking out of order. And then we need to reverse the chemicals we give our body to reverse the chemicals that we're creating that are based on something that isn't happening, that are out of order. We're constantly treating from the exterior rather than notice what's happening on the interior. And I would suggest it will change dramatically in terms of the diagnosis, and start to actually notice that if we're talking about life, truth, reality accurately, a lot of that stuff will start to disappear, because the stress of the body over things not happening as the only thing happening will vanish. And that'll be the end of that chapter. So consider that. Let's continue to talk. I love you. I appreciate you.
Thanks for your help, buddy.
Yeah.
Goodbye, listeners.
See you around campus.
Talk to you soon.
You too. And thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah.